I think the Fat Bob 114 is the best overall Softail Harley Davidson. And welcome back, guys. Today we're doing a test review on something that's been familiar with me but in 2018, but today we're taking out the 2019 Harley Davidson Fat Bob 114. So without further ado, let's kick it into the specs. Lovely jubbly. Now you guys have seen what the specs are like, let's kick it into what this bike sounds like. Bear in mind, this is a stock pipe. It is not going to sound great, but let's hear what this thing sounds like. So let's not beat around the bush. I remember doing a test review on this over a year ago. I went up with Harley Davidson UK, went to Oxford, and I was one of the first customers to test the new Softail range. The Fat Bob, for me, as soon as I saw it, it was one of those bikes that I absolutely loved. And I think one of the reasons is that it was very diverse. It was very different to the typical Harley range that was coming out at that point. We know from over a year ago, the feedback from the customer base was a little bit 50-50. You had the Dyna crew that was clearly having a bit of a moment because they stopped that family of motorbikes. And this was technically brought out to replace that, although it was in the Softail range. At that point, there was lots of negativity thrown at this bike. But for me, this was the bike that I was the most excited to ride out the Softail range. It looked aggressive, it still looked chunky. Yes, there were definitely elements that I wanted to change, but overall, super excited. The first review that I did, I really loved this bike, and since that point, I haven't been on this bike again. For me, the things that I would change on this bike is the obvious thing. So stage one straight away, I would completely take that exhaust off and I'd have a 2-into-1. Now my taste has changed from a year ago, so I'd definitely go for either a Bassini or a TBR exhaust system. And then at the rear, this is what everyone moans about, and I 100% agree with the majority. This rear fender is too high. Now I've now seen kits available on the market whereby you can have the fender that is literally kissing the wheel, and you can take this monstrosity away as well. And for me, those are the things that I would only do on this bike. Yes, obviously you would add things like different hand grips, foot controls, etc., but that would be, for me, the perfect finished aesthetic Fat Bob 114. In terms of my stats, guys, I'm 5'9" and I currently weigh 69.5 kilogram. Sitting on the bike then, in terms of my ergonomics then, in front of me I've got these really nice drag bars, and the way the seat is positioned is that I've got a good lumbar support, so in terms of the way I'm sitting, it's relatively upright. Then we go down to the foot controls, so these are in a forward position, which is really nice. So for me, in terms of mid-distance riding and almost going to long-distance riding, this thing's going to be relatively comfortable. In terms of how viable this bike is for short riders or taller riders, as I mentioned, I'm 5'9", and someone who's smaller, if you like, so going down to 5'7", they're still going to be able to have their feet firmly planted on the ground. And similar, because of the forward controls themselves, if you are a tall rider, you've still got that leg room where you can stretch your legs out. It's a good variance for all types of height, if that makes sense. Then we move on to the actual hand controls themselves. On the right hand side then, we've got engine, stop, start, hazards, and then you've got the self-cancelling right indicator. Moving over to the left hand side, you've got the cycle button, horn, main headlight and high beam, and then underneath that you've got the left cancelling indicator. To the front of us then, guys, with the cycle button itself, when you press it, you've got the time, RPM, total miles, trip A, trip B. So again, I keep on saying this in all my reviews, the instruments are very simple to use. For any beginner getting on this bike, it's going to be an absolute breeze. Okay team, as in all of my test reviews, we're going to go down to the beautiful Beachy Head. You guys know exactly what that's like by now. Really excited to take the Fat Bob down there because there's a fair few twisties and I'll be able to throw this thing about. So let's get cracking. Woo! I've been on the bike now, guys, for a couple of moments, so I thought I'd give you some direct feedback on what it's feeling like. Straight away, I just love the ergonomic riding position. Having the drag bars, having those forward controls on this bike, for me, just means that it's extremely comfortable. The only thing that I would say is that if I need to look at, well, you will need to do this, if I need to look at the speed that I'm going, then with a full face helmet on, I'm having to look down. But I'm nitpicking slightly. The lean angle on these bikes are really, really good. Coupled with the rake and the trail at the front, it just makes it a super nimble bike to be on. Naturally, for me, I'm quite a lazy rider, and what I mean by that is I like to slouch back in the seat, and with the lumbar support coming from the seat, that just means it's nice. It really helps me. The one thing that I would pick up straight away is that brake pedal is too low. So for me to really press down and give it 100%, for my ankle that hasn't got amazing flexibility again, it's not in the ideal position, so that just needs a little bit of adjustment. Going into the first part of the test then, it's the manoeuvrability going around the roundabout. Let's see how this feels. So tucking in, this bike is just so perfectly balanced. I absolutely love it. It's got a great lean angle. I feel very secure on it. I just feel like it's got lots and lots of grip. No counter steering needed. As I mentioned in previous reviews, the 114 Milwaukee 8 engine has just got a great element of power about it. It's a lot cooler than the previous engines from Harley Davidson. More efficient, more power. I can remember from the last Fat Bob 114 review that I did, one of the things that really blew me away was its manoeuvrability and the fact that you can just throw this thing about. It just makes it a real exciting Harley to ride on. Again, going through the roundabout, add a little bit of pace, bobbing in and out, leaning hard, right, then left, easy. Next part of the review then is to make sure that at the national speed limit, this thing isn't vibrating like a tractor. So at 60 miles per hour, what can I feel? Straight away, no vibration coming through the handlebars, no vibration really coming through the foot pedals. So overall for me, this would be a great bike for that mid-range capability. I can easily compare this to my old dyno which I had, which vibrated a hell of a lot, but this bike is definitely a big tick for me in that department. Okay, so we're entering a 60 mile an hour limit. Just want to go as close to zero as possible. Let's do a rolling start. Here we go. 6 miles now, let's do it. I mean, this thing has got gun. In the Softail range, this bike has got the highest torque, and in terms of that, you can absolutely feel it. And then coming out onto this open road, so this is what I'd call the touring aspect of the test ride. And then look at this. Boom! One of the things that I am appreciating on this bike is usually when I go on a Harley Davidson and do a test review, I would say things like, you know, if I think about the Fat Boy, the front suspension, you need to put aftermarket suspension on that. You know, I could talk about the brakes on most Harleys, and that's something I think you would need to change. But in terms of this bike, from a performance aspect of suspension and brakes, you know, you don't need to change it, which is really, really refreshing. Coming into the next part of the twisty. Nice left, and then we're coming into a relatively long right. But again, I'm just trying to push this bike as much as possible within my capability. And then out. And considering the conditions are extremely cold, the road's not very sticky, but this thing is sticking to it. It's great. Then into a relatively long right. A little bit bouncy, coming onto the road where this is not forgiving at all on the suspension. Let's see what this bike feels like. yeah, it's handling it so much better than what the Fat Boy was doing. And although my voice is shaking, which indicates that suspension is working, the front tyre is sticking to that floor. And then we're coming into a relatively tight left, dropping it down, admiring the sun and the beautiful views, then coming out into the open, then opening it up. And this is the thing, this Softail, as I mentioned earlier, it's got the most power out of the Softail range, and boy, you can feel it. And when you're on the open road like this, you can start to really appreciate it as it's chewing up that road, dropping it down. See what these brakes are like, going into a, I'd say, mid-right, nice lean, powering out, then into a left, braking and dropping the gears down, admiring that beautiful view with the white cliffs, and then let's open it up again. What an animal! In fourth gear, coming into the last part of the test, which is the real tight twisties. So we have a tight left into a tight right. I'm going to drop it down into third gear. I'm going to apply a little bit of back brake, moving into it. I mean, this thing is just chewing it up. This is going to be the best one I've had so far in the Softails. Into that left. Yeah, this is great. Super good and powering it out. Lovely. Woo! So let's get into what I thought about this bike overall. Question I always ask myself at the end of these reviews is, would I buy this bike? So for me, if I hadn't invested in my new Sportster Fat G, would I get this bike? The honest answer is yes. I absolutely love the Fat Bob 114. For me, it's kind of got everything that I like, and I'll explain why. So what I love about Harley Davidson, or most of the range, is that you can throw it about, and with a bike like this you absolutely can. The other aspect that I absolutely love about this bike is the power. So the Milwaukee 8 engine is an amazing engine overall. It is a big leap forward versus the twin cam. More power, less vibration, more action. Other things that I love is the suspension on this bike. In the Softail range, this one seems to have a massive tick against it. So the front forks handle extremely well. I love the way they're inverted as well. They look super chunky. The rears, obviously, with all the other Softails, are very good. The other crucial part that I love is the riding position, from the way the forward controls are all the way to the drag bars, and actually how the seat complements the all-round rider experience is really important. When you pin that throttle back, that seat is keeping you firmly in position. I love as well that you've got the LEDs at the front. Now, a lot of people will say, I don't like the shape of it, but for me, it suits this bike. It looks really, really good. So what are the things that I'm not a fan of? So first things first, you have to change the exhaust and the air cleaner. So stage one would be a priority for me. Although it does sound nice in stock form when you're pinning it back. The other thing that I would splash out is a new rear fender. So I'd make sure that I'd have a fender that is kissing the tyre, and I'd get rid of that ugly thing sticking out of the back wheel as well, with a side plate. You could go as far as changing indicators, then going into the hand grips and the foot controls and having some aftermarket parts put on. But I think just those simple changes that I've spoken about is enough for this bike. So just to summarise, I think the Fat Bob 114 is the best overall Softail Harley Davidson. So those are my thoughts, guys, on the Fat Bob 114. Please feel free to put your comments in the comment section below. But as always, stay safe. See you on the next review stroke vlog. All the best. Motonewbrider.